Welcome, I'm Yvonne, and here's what happened this week. The heat is on for Taiwan's presidential candidates. They're now hitting the trail, letting some of Taiwan's most impactful voters know where they stand on the issues. Our reporter Jeremy Olivier went to see how one group, Taiwan's workers, could vote in January.
A local tragedy that became a national conversation. A devastating fire in Taiwan South in September killed 10 people, including 4 firefighters. It brought attention to the dangerous conditions these workers face and spurred protests over Taiwan's labor laws, which prevent public employees like them from forming unions. Now, with January's presidential elections edging ever closer, labor groups want to know the candidates' positions on labor rights. A group of the country's biggest trade unions invited all 3 hopefuls to appear back-to-back on the same stage in Taipei to clarify their stances.
此次要求候选人回答的5个问题：退休要保障，并购要协商，劳权要完整，劳工要加薪，转型要公正。
First to take the stage was the Democratic Progressive Party's Lai Ching-te, Taiwan's current vice president. In the wake of the firefighters' protests, Lai was the only candidate that did not voice clear support for their efforts to unionize. This time, he was more direct.
我是支持现在行政院已经送到立法院审议的，更加的放宽公务人员可以筹组特种协会，而且也松绑，更进一步的松绑警消还有其他的公务人员可以筹组特种协会以外，也可以有更多团体协约权的权利。
The Kuomintang's Hou Youyi called attention to Taiwan's low wages. He said if he's elected, he'll raise the minimum wage to a little over $1,000 a month. He'd also offer more incentives for companies that raise worker salaries.
政府挺企业，企业挺员工。只要企业为员工加薪，政府就为企业减税。
Last was former Taipei Mayor Gov't of the Taiwan People's Party. Instead of making promises about better pay, Ke pointed to issues within Taiwan's education system.
这个青年失业是一个问题，不过那个主要是我们应该技职教育没有做好的那个实习没有做好，所以通常毕业以后他也不晓得干什么，所以有一段时间会空出来，包括又去念研究所，我觉得那个是延后失业的时间。
After all the candidates had made their case, organizers held an informal poll, asking the audience and those watching online who they backed most. Despite previous negative remarks he's made about labor, Gov't was voted as the one who best represents their interests. To some, it came as a surprise.
Part of it goes back to Gov's anti-establishment appeal, in that many of his supporters actually don't know his policies or cannot name them, but they support him on the basis of his personality. And so this is in turn a very kind of populist style of campaigning by Gov't.
And although Ke was able to win this crowd over, a lot can happen in a short time. Taiwan's main political parties are known for being pro-business. But events like this show that workers represent a major voting bloc, one that will have a big say in who takes office next year. Patrick Chen, Yvonne Yang, and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan President Tsai says China's internal challenges mean it's unlikely to be considering an invasion of Taiwan.
The Chinese leadership at this juncture is overwhelmed by its internal challenges. And my thought is that perhaps this is not a time for them to consider a major invasion of Taiwan.
Tsai told the New York Times that China is facing internal economic problems. She also said the international community has made it clear that peace and stability is in everyone's interest. China considers Taiwan as part of its territory, but Taiwan says only its people can decide the country's future. Taiwan's military is showing off its new jet trainer while getting ready to say goodbye to its oldest aircraft. Hamilton reports from eastern Taiwan.
Taiwan says farewell to one of its oldest fighter jets. For almost 50 years, these American-made F-5s, also known as Tigers, were used to not only defend the skies above Taiwan, but also to train the country's fighter pilots.
说要换装，其实对我而言，只是换一个地方， 然后飞不一样的飞机。那准备跟学习的方式其实都是一样的，努力付出。
But this goodbye marks a new era for Taiwan's Air Force. Replacing the F-5 are these new domestically made advanced jet trainers. They're unique in that they use a state-of-the-art simulator to help pilots get a feel for the variety of jets Taiwan has in service.
With the advanced, flight control and all that heads-up display, it's easier for us to simulate like a real enemy and to have our training.
The Jet Trainer, or Brave Eagle as it's nicknamed, it's part of Taiwan's efforts to modernize its military. And because they're locally made, Taiwan is able to not only cut costs, but also boost its domestic defense industry. This Air Force base in Taidong is home to one of the country's largest training facilities. And it's also going to be home to 66 of these brand new jet trainers. Now, the military hopes that these new aircraft and the technology that's inside them will help better train its Air Force pilots. Taiwan's Air Force is under immense pressure as it scrambles regularly to intercept Chinese warplanes flying near the country. Part of the decision to retire the F-5 was due to safety concerns, as the military has been dealing with a string of recent accidents, losing several aircraft and pilots in the past 3 years. That's why analysts say the move to retire the F-5 is the right decision.
台湾的 F5其实并没有跟其他国家一样有做一个 upgrade， 也就是它的 jet 那个弹射椅没有升级，所以一旦出现飞行员操作失误或者是机械故障的话，飞行员可能就比较没有这个逃生的机会。
On top of the modernization efforts, Taiwan also hopes the new aircraft can help solve a pilot shortage. New recruits that have already flown the jet trainer say it's much easier to handle the craft, something that should benefit a strained force. But regardless of the difficulty, trainees like this one are committed to doing whatever it takes to get ready for the worst.
We are trying to be 100% ready if there is any possible war.
All 66 of the Brave Eagle jet trainers are set to be delivered by 2026. And for young pilots like Kai, the next step is making the transition from a jet trainer to a fully armed fighter jet. Joseph Wu and Jaime Okan in Taidong for TaiwanPlus.
As Taiwan deals with the demographic crisis, its government is pushing to get more women to have children. That includes increasing subsidies for fertility treatments. But as Jeremy Olivier reports, some say women over 40 could use a bit more than what's on offer.
Ms. Xie is about to make one of the biggest decisions of her life. She and her husband already have one child, and now they want another. But because she's over 40, the risk of complications during pregnancy and childbirth is higher. One of the safest ways to have a child at this point is through in vitro fertilization, or IVF. That's when an egg is taken from a woman's ovaries, fertilized with sperm, and then placed in her womb. Lucky for her, Taiwan's government, looking to slow the rapid decline of the country's birth rate, expanded subsidies for IVF in 2021.
我跟我先生讨论过后，就是因为有补助，所以我们就决定就不要浪费时间，赶快开始做试管。
Ms. Xie has already tried IVF twice with no luck. Under the government's plan, women between 40 and 45 can only get the subsidy for 3 treatments. After that, they're on their own. But reproductive experts say that's just not enough. Once women turn 40, the chance of a successful IVF procedure drops exponentially. So they suggest doubling the number of subsidized treatments, or at least increasing how many embryos are implanted during the procedure.
比如提高比如直到3颗或者到40到42 3颗，43岁也许放到4颗，这样的话就可以完成政府的美意，对不对？你要让它能够成功，不是要补助是手段，我最好一次补助它都成功。
But not all are convinced that this is the best approach.
考量到母婴的风险啊，不是说植入越多越好，你植入越多，你到时候你还是要减胎呀。
Taiwan's health authorities say they're working on updating the rules based on public feedback. The country has set aside around $83 million for IVF subsidies for 2024. But as Taiwan's population continues to age and shrink, people like Ms. Xie are hoping more of that money can be used for them to have a chance at parenthood. James Lin and Jeremy Olivier for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's economy is having its worst year for growth since the financial crisis. The government predicts the economy will grow by just over 1.4% in 2023, the lowest since 2009. Business boomed in 2021 as demand for Taiwan's electronics surged, but since then, growth has slowed. Officials blame high global inflation and geopolitical tensions. For more on Taiwan's slow economic growth, our reporter Stash Buller spoke to economist Alicia Garcia Herrero.
Officials in Taiwan are pinning the blame for slow growth on things outside the country, like global inflation. So that kind of begs the question, how much of what happens to Taiwan's economy is actually in the government's control?
It is quite true that a lot of what's happening is the semiconductor cycle, which has been unfavorable for a year and a half at least. But there's also this idea that I think Taiwan needs to find new sectors, not only the semiconductor sector. So if they had diversified the economy before, they wouldn't need to blame the external environment. In other words,
has the government done enough to diversify?
I don't think they have. An industry that they could actually have started developed during COVID, the tourism industry. We don't know whether, global manufacturing is going to shrink as many things because of the digitalization globally. So what about services? What about tourism? What about digital services as well? Not only hardware. So I think these are things that Taiwan has to start thinking about.
How much will officials in Taiwan be looking at, some of the economic worries coming out of China and worrying about the effect that will have on the economy here?
So, we know China is going to continue to decelerate slightly. But of course, it affects Taiwan because Taiwan is still so dependent on exports into the mainland. Because we know this is structural, that China will continue to slow down, I think Taiwan needs to find other sources of growth in the southbound strategy, kind of rethink it, foster it further. India, I think all of these high growth places in the surroundings of Taiwan should be the aim of their trade policy.
That was Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief economist for Asia Pacific and Netices, speaking to Stash Baller. Taiwan is working to keep relations with India on track after public opposition to a plan to welcome Indian migrant workers to the country. Louis Watt reports from Taiwan's legislature.
Should Taiwan allow in migrant workers from India? That's become a hot topic as Taipei prepares to sign an MOU with New Delhi to pave the way for just that. Taiwan already has more than 700,000 migrant workers. They come mostly from Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. They take care of the ill and disabled and work in factories. And there's an urgent need for such low-wage labor. But opposition to the introduction of Indian migrant workers has grown. That's after online rumors that said Taiwan could allow in 100,000 migrant workers, which Taiwan's foreign ministry says sparked racist comments and bears the hallmark of Chinese cognitive warfare. A legislator from the ruling party organized this event in the Legislative Yuan to explain to Taiwanese why it's important to Taiwan to have migrant workers from India.
在2025年，台湾65岁以上的人口比例会高达20%。那我们没有人口红利了，那我们需要更多的朋友来帮助我们。那印度其实我们也很清楚，印度的劳工的这些能力非常好。
The quota for Indian workers can't be discussed till the MOU is signed, which should happen before the end of 2023. Bringing in migrant workers is seen as a way for Taipei and Delhi to get closer, a big help to Taiwan as it's pressured and isolated by China internationally. Justin Wu and Louise Watt at the Legislative Yuan for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Here's What Happened. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, you can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow us on social media. Before we go, take a look at this endangered Sumatran rhino calf in Indonesia. I'm Yvonne. Take care, and I'll see you next time.